Hey everyone, hey Arizona filmmakers. We are on our first episode of the RoundTable Talk, a new podcast for Arizona filmmakers where we'll be interviewing different people from Arizona in the film industry. And today we have our host, Kayla. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kayla Windsor. I'm a freelance filmmaker here in Arizona, and I'm also on the board of the Arizona Production Association. We have a beautiful podcast set up here in Sanivo, and our first guests are Phil Bradstock in our Phoenix film office, Peter Catalanotte in Tucson Film Tucson, and then we have Matthew Earl Jones, our director of Arizona Film and Digital Media. So I would like to go around the table and have you guys introduce yourself, how you got to Arizona and in the film industry.
Sure. So I'm the director of Film Tucson. As I mentioned, I'm actually an Arizona native. I was born and raised in Phoenix and then moved to Tucson to go to school, and I've stayed ever since. I've been at Film Tucson about almost 25 years, a little bit shy of that. We've worked with everybody from Steven Soderbergh to George Clooney to Todd Phillips. I was trying to remember his name. We recently worked with a short segment of Steven Spielberg's latest film, The Fabelmans. And then an HBO pilot that just shot. It hasn't aired yet, and it was produced by J.J. Abrams. So we've got a long history of filming, and we love our job. So I've been doing it for a long time, and I hope to do it for a longer time still.
Amazing.
I would like to question that for how did you get into this, and what was that love, that kind of...
I've just always been a film geek, or film nerd, whatever you want to say, and I was working at the film library at the University of Arizona and was looking to make a transition, as people say, and this job opened up and I applied. I didn't get it the first time. Someone else got it, and then that person didn't stick around, I think because they thought they were going to be on film sets all day, which is not what our job is. It's sales and marketing. So when it opened up again, I applied again and got it, and I've been there ever since. So, long time.
Amazing. Gonna go next?
Sure. So I'm with the Phoenix Film Office. The Phoenix Film Office has been around since 1974, October 8th, 1974. So we're coming up almost on our 50th anniversary here in about another year. So I got to figure out the celebration for that. The Phoenix Film Office is part of economic development for the city of Phoenix, and I oversee the defined boundaries of the city of Phoenix. So any permitting, anything that goes on there. How did I get into this business is probably a question that you're looking for me to answer. The reality is I actually have a degree in political science from Boston College. Ended up traveling around the world, supposed to go to law school afterwards. But funny enough, my family, my cousin was the showrunner on the TV show Suddenly Susan and executive producer, and it had been canceled. And they had 5 more episodes to make, and people started jumping ship. I was out here at 24 years old. Parents are trying to now kick me out and go do something. And she said, "You want to get the writers their lunches?" And I said, "Sure." So I packed up my Volkswagen Golf, drove to Burbank, started working at Warner Brothers Television. And because I grew up out here in Phoenix, my father was a general contractor. I found that the film industry was really similar to the general contracting business because of all the different layers and how things work. It just was kind of a natural thing. I always say, if you're a child of a dentist, you don't know how to do a root canal, but you know everything about a root canal. So I was kind of that way with kind of contracting as well. So it just made a lot of sense to me. And I got in at Warner Brothers, and they liked me, and I stayed there for 6 years. Basically a production coordinator, mostly multi-camera sitcoms, a few 1 hours here and there. But then I met my wife, and we realized we were going to get married and didn't want to raise a family in La La Land. So I happened to move out here. I got my first job here working on Room Raiders for MTV. That was an interesting experience. And then as I was doing that, I've been meeting some locals, and they said a film commissioner position was opening up. And the lady who had previously had this, she started in, I believe, 1978 and retired in 2005. And I happened to move here right in the beginning of 2006. That's when they were doing the hiring process. And so I applied and I ended up getting the job, and I've been doing it for almost 17 years now.
Wow.
So I'm kind of new to the game. I'm the director of Arizona Film and Digital Media, the State Film Office. I've been here for 21 years. Before that, 16 years in LA, and then originally from New York. been the film commissioner about 6.5 years. So I don't know if your audience knows, but when the incentives went away back in 2010, the film office was closed. So it had been shut down for 6 years. And so when I started, I like to say I inherited a hat and this pin. We're a program of the Arizona Commerce Authority. So while we do the traditional role of a film office, which is usually in tourism, we're very much focused on the economic impact of the film industry in Arizona, and especially in our rural areas and our tribal areas. And what we found is the most important thing that people are really looking for is local hires. You know, if they have to bring people from out of state, it's very expensive. So in addition to providing the services that my counterparts do on a statewide level, we're also really focused on rebuilding the infrastructure. There have been a lot of great organizations, the APA, Phil, Peter, who when the agency was shut down, not the agency, but the film office was shut down, they really had to pick up our slack. So we've been back 6 years, and things are going well. I was sent to London on my third day without a business card, and they said, go sell Arizona's. I said, okay, I will. But it's a phenomenal state. I love being here. I've been here 21 years, no intention of leaving. I have a family here and property here. So even though I was very new to being a film commissioner, I believed in the product. And I have very much relied on these two gentlemen here for advice, because both of them have done this a lot longer, and sometimes they're there to help talk me off the edge. I went from being a freelance producer to working for government. So that's a pretty...
It's a big jump.
Big switch.
Yeah.
I think the big difference is that when you're a producer, the word no does not exist. There's always a way, but in government, there is a line, and you cannot cross that.
Right.
Well, as we say, we're used to begging for forgiveness to get something done as a producer, as opposed to asking for permission. But, you know, we have the public trust. We spend public dollars, so that kind of mentality that a producer has would not be effective in a government position. The Commerce Authority has been very kind to allow me some flexibility and to set some policies. And coming up through understanding the chain of command, I used to be a corporate executive in New York. It hasn't been that tough an adjustment, but I often rely on these guys for moral support. So,
Awesome. So the point of this podcast is really to educate people as to why they should come film in Arizona. And I felt like you guys would probably be the most influential group to kind of explain why people should come here. So what's your favorite part in explaining to people and why they should come to Arizona?
From a state standpoint, I think we have everything you would need. I was the line producer in commercials from LA, so I shot all over the Southwest, and you know, we've got the most diverse topography on the planet. We're hour and 10-minute flight or a 6-hour drive, so the proximity to California is undeniable. But we've got a phenomenal infrastructure here, which usually is kind of second known to our great locations. You know, if you have the Grand Canyon and Canyon de Chelly and places like that, that's a tough act to follow. But that's really just the tip of the spear. We've got a really great infrastructure of vendors, crew, talent. So pretty much everything you would need, you can find here locally. And what you do need to bring from LA, we're the next stop. So we're closer to LA than San Francisco is, by about 20 miles or something like that. So even under a union contract, a person or equipment can travel and work on the same day, which is a huge advantage for us. But obviously we're trying to capitalize on our great locations, but really the great infrastructure we have here and that we've been working on building.
I was going to add to the proximity, just to give an example. I know a local producer that had a contract to sign with a couple of people that were in Calabasas, just a little bit, north of LA. And they said, unfortunately, we need a wet signature on this particular document. Can you meet us at LAX? And he said, not a problem. So he left his office in Tempe, got on the plane, flew to LAX, called them and said, I'm here at the curb. They said, we're still 15 minutes away. So that'll just give you an idea of how easy it is to get from Phoenix to LA, but how hard it is to get around LA. So that's also a major selling point. It's just our proximity. And as you mentioned, if there is equipment, maybe something specialized that's not here, you're only like a 5.5, 6 hour drive, depending upon LA traffic to get here, or you're just a quick 50 or an hour long flight to get here. But also to answer your question too, I mean, with Arizona, there are the different topographies that are here, but also each city I think is very unique in what it offers. I mean, here in the greater Phoenix area, which is, Phoenix is the 5th most populated city in America. When we look at the MSA, the Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is all greater Phoenix, it's the 10th largest, so it's larger than Boston. You can really get a lot of the looks that you're going to need out here, not necessarily the snow or the pine trees, nor the Old West sets as much anymore. But when you're looking for that downtown dense urban environment, when you're looking for the Anywhere USA homes, when you're looking for the desert landscapes like the Road to Nowheres, we have those. And so with the airport being here, it's really convenient for productions to come from London, to come from New York, to come from LA, and to come out here and film. And also the crew is actually quite good out here. I know that sometimes people may say, oh, that's Arizona, but I will tell you that the producer for the Gronkowski field goal kick told me that he sent too many people out here. He didn't realize the quality of people we had here in Phoenix. And so next time he comes, he's not going to be bringing a lot of people with him. And so, yeah, those are
amazing.
really good stories.
So you heard it here first. Great quality crew here.
Well, we do have snow and pine trees up in Flagstaff too, and that's only a 2.5 hour drive at most. And then another thing that everyone says all the time is the only thing we don't have in Arizona is a beach.
We have one now.
We do have one now.
And I have to say something I found out is they actually have a ski resort in Tucson.
I have heard that too. We have a ski resort.
At the top of Mount Lemon, it's about a 9,000 feet mountain that's basically within our city. So you can drive to the top and you're at a pine forest with snow. Yeah, pretty cool.
I think most people don't know that. And then you're right, the only location we didn't have was a beach. And following up on some of the great success that's happened in southern Arizona with northern Mexico, we were at a governor's conference, and a gentleman, Gaston Pavlovich, who produced The Irishman, and his cousin is Claudia Pavlovich, the former governor of Sonora. He said, between Arizona and Sonora, there's no location we can't find. And I was like, wow, you're right. And about a month later, we were at a big trade show, and I happened to run into the film commissioner from the state of Sonora. So back in 2019, the state of Arizona and the state of Sonora signed a memorandum of understanding to kind of work together to bring cross-border productions. And Peter, I will defer to him because he's been doing that for the whole time he's been there. And so he can talk to some of the successes in that. But the best thing from our standpoint is normally my job is importing jobs. So I'm competing with New Mexico or Nevada or Utah, Colorado to say, no, bring your project to Arizona. So I'm importing those jobs. This deal allows us actually to export our creatives, our equipment, our actors and actresses. So people say, well, why would you want to promote a beach in Mexico? I go, because I don't have one of my own. So I wouldn't have gotten those fees anyway. I wouldn't have gotten those hotel things. But what we do get, and being in commerce, it's very important, we get to make sure that Arizona crew people have other options of where they can work, that Arizona vendors and, Monsoon Production Services does something like 28 or 38% of their business south of the border. And I will now defer to Peter, who can list some of the great successes that they've had.
Sure. Well, so back in 1999, we got a call from the production company that was run by George Clooney and Steven Soderbergh. They used to have a company together. Steven Soderbergh had a new film he was making called Traffic, and they had some scenes set in Tijuana, but they didn't want to film there. They deemed it too dangerous. So they said, what do you have that looks like Mexico? So we drove the production to Nogales, Arizona, which is just right there on the border. And we drove around, and there were some things he liked, and they were talking about how to dress it to make it look more like Mexico. And it was, by all accounts, ready to go. They were going to come back and film. But at that time, it was before 9/11, so it was really easy to go over the border. And Steven Soderbergh said, why don't we just go over the border? I just want to see what Mexico looks like. So as soon as he saw Mexico, you can't replicate that. The density of a border town and the noises and the wiring and the buildings, it's just an incredible look, and the people. So he asked us, can you make the filming happen on this side? And we said, yes, we can. We have a lot of connections with Mexico, politically and culturally. So it was very easy for us to go to the authorities on the other side and set up meetings with their police, their fire, their mayor, so forth. We were able to create a dedicated lane for Soderbergh and his team to film on the other side. Their base camp was on the Arizona side. So they utilized Arizona crew, Arizona catering, everything Arizona, but they did it all in Mexico. They did hire some Mexican crew and so forth as well, which was great. We loved it both sides. It's win-win. So now fast forward about 3 years later, George Clooney and Soderbergh still have a company together, and Clooney's making a film called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. And there were some scenes set in Mexico. So once again, we were asked to set up filming on both sides. So we did that for that show as well. Since then, we've had productions from Mexico that want to film on our side or both sides, depending on the story. So we have a great relationship with Mexico. This memorandum of understanding only reinforces that. So it's really wonderful that we've got another industry to pitch to, the Mexican film industry, which is flourishing. It just gives us another avenue to market Southern Arizona. So we love it. It's really great.
And Peter's being really modest about that. I would just like to say that the ability that a Hollywood company can work with either the state of Arizona or the city of Tucson or any of our locales here, and that we have those relationships in Mexico. Tucson, obviously the strongest, but the Arizona-Mexico Commission's been around for 60 years. In fact, we signed the MOU at the 60th anniversary of that organization. Mexico's Arizona's #1 trading partner. So, despite whatever rumors people might have heard, it's a wonderful place to be and to visit. And now through these efforts, it's a great place to shoot. But an American company, let's say they're based in New York or LA, can work with another American company. So there's not the language issue, there's not the currency issues. And Peter, I remember a meeting we went to with Customs and Border Protection for both sides. And, this is an area that I don't think anybody does better than the Tucson Film Office. And they have a ton of experience, and we are, given the amount of money that studios are pouring into Spanish language content, Netflix recently, right, and they've been shooting, at beaches that are off the coast of Mexico City or off the coast of Hermosillo because there's an infrastructure there. So in this situation, they get these pristine beaches in the Sea of Cortez. They get Arizona resources, and kind of Peter, to a large extent, is the person on the ground that, the state film office put this together so we may coordinate things. But when it comes to the implementation, he's been doing this for 20 years. I remember when I was a producer in LA, we were looking to do a Japanese commercial, and we went to scout in Mexico, and Peter and Shelley had just started. So this was, a long time ago, and they took us to the monastery outside of Tucson, but we were they wanted to shoot off pyrotechnics, so the church was not a fan of that. But they took us down to Nogales, and I think that you can have the level of support that all the Arizona film commissions are known for, but you can talk to someone who's an American and speaks the language, but is very knowledgeable about, especially northern Mexico, is a real asset. And we're hoping that now that we're out of COVID, that will really develop and bear fruit for crew and talent from Arizona.
And you have a bilingual office.
Yeah. So our production coordinator now, she's from Mexico. She's from Hermosillo, Mexico.
Yeah.
So she already has ties to Mexico, knows the language, knows the culture. So it is really nice when we have a production from Mexico. Mi español es muy mal. Hers is perfect. So it's really great to have someone in the office that can speak to the filmmakers in the language they understand. So yeah, we're happy to help with that.
It's amazing because like even the closest beach in Rocky Point is 4 hours away from here. So someone flying in from London would have to drive 6 hours to LA for a beach, and it's 4 to a beach in Mexico from here.
And now they have commercial flights
Yeah.
going in on Khalifa Air. It flies out of Ensenada or Tijuana or someplace, but you can go from LA down, and that's still a lot faster than driving it.
That's such a, like, never thought that the connection between Mexico and Arizona would be such a strong one. Like,
Sure.
that's something that would have went over my head, not even think about. But now that you guys brought that up, I'm like,
It's huge.
that's huge.
I mean, the border is an issue that we all deal with as Americans, and it's so filmmakers want to tell those stories on both sides of the border. So when they do, we're ready with that because we've been filming on both sides of the border for decades. Yeah.
The state also did a similar kind of, and actually the MOU, we borrowed the one from Sonora, and 2 years ago we signed an MOU with the Navajo Nation. So in the state of Arizona, some of the most beautiful, I think it's 28% of the land is under tribal jurisdiction. And it's some of the most, I mean, Monument Valley, Canyon de Chelly. I mean, you're talking about just some of the most awe-inspiring landscapes on the planet are under our tribal jurisdiction. So we made a similar MOU with Navajo Nation, and now that we are post-COVID, hopefully, and they're back open to 100%, we are really expecting that to bear fruit, and we're talking to other tribes all throughout the state. So
Yeah. Now, for people like me who are, kind of new at all this, what is MOU?
Memorandum of Understanding. So it's kind of like a contract, but not as legally binding, but it lays out what our intention is and who the parties are. And
It's like a declaration between two governments.
Yeah.
That's the word to announce that we are doing this partnership and we're working together. It's just something that you can point to in the future. So that way all the agencies know this is something that is sort of coming from above, that we're going to work together. So it's a nice thing to have. Yeah.
and Sandra Watson a couple of years ago signed the MOU with the president of the Navajo Nation. They have a new president, so we'll probably be preparing a new document with his name on it for Sandra to sign. But our tribal lands are some of the most beautiful. Our tribal communities are very, very viable to the state of Arizona, and happen to be, it's a very hot topic, just like the border's a very hot topic right now. There seems to be a renaissance in Native American spirituality and things like that. So I think our goal was at first to expand our location offerings, but we're also able to create job opportunities for people who might not have been able to experience those things in the past.
Wow, it's amazing. So most everyone, when they think of Arizona, thinks of the desert and Westerns. So I wanted to ask you with Mescal and what was the other one? Old Tucson, how that's going.
It's actually doing very well. So for those that don't know, Old Tucson is a Western town that was built in 1940 for a movie called Arizona, starring William Holden. I think I'm right about that. I'd have to go check my phone, but it's turned off. So that Western town, Old Tucson, has been going since 1940, and it's had hundreds and hundreds of Westerns over the years. A lot of them starring John Wayne, Paul Newman. Throw some names out at me. I'm going blank here. There's lots. People at home with their computers can look it up. But Old Tucson, yeah, it's
Heartthrob from
yeah,
No Bravo.
yeah. Montgomery Clift. Maybe, okay. So you get the point. There's lots of big films that have been shot there. In 1968, there were so many that they opened up a sister city called Mescal on the east side of town. Old Tucson's on the west side of Tucson, right about 15 minutes from the downtown, not far at all. And then Mescal is 45 minutes from the downtown in more of a grasslands area. On the west side, it's more saguaros and mountains and things like that. So they had two Western sets going at the same time. That's how many Westerns were being made in Arizona back then. In 1998, when Canada started their film incentives program and things started to go north, for all American states, not just Arizona. Things dried up a little bit. The Western as a genre was maybe being ignored for Star Wars type sci-fi things and whatnot. But since, I would say, like in the last 2 or 3 years, we've done a number of indie Westerns that have come back. And especially since the new film incentives, which we're going to get back to, were announced, we're getting a treasure trove of calls for Westerns. We went out to American Film Market, Phil and I, and then the Flagstaff Film Office. We had a booth at the American Film Market back in November of 2022. This is in Los Angeles. It's a trade show for distributors, filmmakers, and then film offices such as ours. And we got a lot of attention because we had incentives. There, for whatever reason, there were lots of filmmakers that came to our booth to talk about Westerns. They have a Western, they need a Western town. So we get a lot of calls for that. We also get a lot of calls for our ranches. The musical Oklahoma from 1955, the movie musical, you might know, none of it was filmed in Oklahoma. It was all filmed south of Tucson. So we have that look as well. So that's not quite a Western, but it still kind of falls under the same umbrella. We just have a lot of rural looks, and so the Western is something that seems to be springing up again with Kevin Costner's projects and more. So we're ready to take them. We've got 3 Western towns. There's a third one called Gammon's Gulch that looks very good as well, and they've been getting some filming. So yeah, anyone out there that has a Western, please come talk to us because we've got them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also mining towns, right? We have Bisbee, kind of. People go to Bisbee.
There's a bunch in the north.
There's a bunch near Jerome, and then also if you go like towards Superior, Miami Globe, there's some. Yeah, I mean, I think that, and it's part of our job as film commissioners to get this out, and I think now with all these new developments, we'll be able to do that. But sometimes we've been the victim of our own success. The Westerns were iconic. There was a time that it was New York, LA, Tucson as filming destinations in the country. So we definitely want to not only show respect for that history, but even more than those movies, which I think this will really stead us well. We've had relationships with these studios going back close to 100 years. So even for people who don't like Westerns, or they were, I'm old enough to remember some of those movies and stuff like that, but for a lot of younger people, these actors we're talking about, these movies don't mean anything to them. But if you say Warner Brothers, if you say Universal, if you say Paramount, so while we've had this history that was started and really developed through our wonderful landscapes and our Western towns, I think what people are now seeing is Arizona has had a relationship and a positive, mutually beneficial relationship with Hollywood for almost 100 years.
Well, going into the tax incentive, that's something that's bringing people out here again. So I wanted to see, how did it come about this time, and what's, the hopes that we have with this new incentive?
Well, I can start by talking about maybe the history of it, and then we'll kind of segue into Peter. So the original film incentive that we had was a transferable tax credit, and it existed from January 1 of 2006 until the end in December 2010. It was a 5-year program, and it always had a sunset clause in it. There were some kind of issues with the legislation, in the fact that if anyone applied to the program, it was like a 3-page application. They didn't have to pay anything. They didn't have to show they actually had funding, and then they would get a certain amount of the credits. So, for example, if you had a $15 million movie, you would get $5 million in tax credits at 30%, okay? So you would go and you would apply to the program. The Department of Revenue would write you the sheet of paper, but more so, they would take the $5 million out of the overall allocation for the year and dedicate it to your project. So we had too many people running around with no money but this piece of paper. So when major projects like a Sony came into town and they actually had a viable project, they couldn't get into the program because there wasn't any money. So there were some issues that happened. The film community got together. We created a blackball rule. Basically said that if you apply, you don't begin in 90 days, you lose your tax credits and you can't apply for the program for another 3 years. So that kind of caused a lot of pause. And we started to actually see a pickup of productions coming out here. And unfortunately, because of the end date that was there, and we couldn't get it extended. It just went ahead and died. So basically, there were about, if I remember correctly, it was 56 projects, and about $110 million was spent in the state of Arizona over those 5 years. So it really had a big impact what was going on. But that's what we had since it went away. It's really just been what I call reality TV specials, which is kind of like, I mean, at least in Phoenix, it'll be like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, and one of the contestants lives here, so it's come meet the parents. We do a ton of commercials out here, a lot of national commercial spots. So really our focus since that time in the past 12 or so years has just been on the commercials and things that don't require an incentive. Like probably in your world, a lot of the independent filmmakers, you're really not at a level to go to an incentivized state and participate in the program because maybe there's a minimum spend and you don't meet that. Or even if you did meet it, the amount of money it would cost on accountants afterwards to look at all of your costs versus you just having a friend here that has a bar that you just go and film at the bar or the house. There you don't know anybody. You're having to pay for all your locations. So really what we dealt with was the commercials and the really independent movies out here during that time. But then we had Duster came along.
Duster is a TV series that's going to be on HBO eventually. But they came to us in, I'm so bad at remembering, it was 2021 maybe. We got a call, I remember it was a Saturday, from Georgia Cacandy. She's a producer who's worked with Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino and others. And she was calling to say this HBO series is shooting a pilot and they need to find some locations in Tucson for it. It was actually set in Phoenix in 1972. That's the storyline. But Phoenix, they felt, was maybe too big now, and they needed a city that was the size of Phoenix in 1972. So I took her around to see some things, and I thought, frankly, that without incentives, we weren't going to get this show. But she pretty much let me know right then and there when I took her to the airport, no, this is going to happen. You're going to make this happen. Okay, great. So we are. So we set everything up, and a locations team came out. They found what they needed. And filming commenced for about almost 6 months. It was just a little bit shy of 6 months. They ended up spending $10 million over the course of that time, almost 10,000 room nights. I can't remember all that. I don't have it in front of me, but the number of local crew they hired was astronomical. It was a fantastic thing to have. I forget where I was going with this because you gave me something.
That was a great handoff.
The catalyst.
Yes, the incentives. That's what we started talking about.
Thanks for picking up.
Thank you. So, sadly, if my correction is correct, the incentives bill that first dropped for this, that is now a law, it was happening at the tail end of Duster. So when a project comes in, all the film offices do that. We keep track of everything they spend, how many locals they hire, the hotels they stay at, everything, because we need to show our community the economic impact of that project. And it's good for us to know what businesses they utilize. So future projects, we know who has film experience, and it's just good for us to know that in general too. So we kept track of all of that. So when the bill was winding its way through the legislature, our office made sure to appear whenever the bill was being debated by the legislature because we wanted our representatives to know the numbers that Duster brought. So I'd like to think that helped push the incentive along in some ways because we had a real world recent example of the cause and effect of filming coming and the money it pumps into your city or town. So that was the great thing about having Duster here. The sad note, but I'll have a good part at the end. The sad note is the incentives, though it is now law, which we're eternally thankful for, it didn't come soon enough to keep Duster here. The show ended up going to New Mexico for a number of reasons. The incentives are part of the reason, but it's shooting now in New Mexico. But the good thing about this is, again, I mentioned the producer, Georgia Cacandy. She's total A-class producer, one of the biggest in Hollywood, and she knows Tucson now. She knows our office. She knows what Arizona has to offer. The locations team are folks that have worked on major films and TV series for decades. They got to scour almost every part of Southern Arizona and part of Phoenix, so they know what Arizona has to offer. It really was a great way for this grade A team of filmmakers to know firsthand how great Arizona is. So now that we have incentives starting up, they're going to be able to bring things in the future because they're already well acquainted of what Arizona has to offer.
It is. It's a small town. People talk. And so when you have the incentive, which, finance is gonna dictate where a lot of these projects go. But if they know that they came out here, they had a great experience, they know they're going to get it again. And so the word of mouth is really important. And so exactly what you say, I mean, they gave them a chance to vacation a little bit, go check out Arizona and provide possible things. I mean, maybe that her next movie has to do with outer space. Maybe that won't work here, but it is maybe the next project in line. That's something that Arizona could take a look at getting.
The locations teams, all the locations people around the world talk to each other a lot. There's an organization, the Location Managers Guild International, LMGI. They have a listserv where they all talk amongst themselves. They might just sort of be talking about their day. Oh, we're dealing with high winds at our location. How about you? Oh, we're dealing with traffic or whatever. So it's a nice way where they just sort of talk to each other, but they also talk to each other about projects they're about to embark upon. Boy, I'm needing a desert. This director's looking for this and the other. And so the ones that worked on Duster might be able to say to this person, oh, talk to Peter about the desert. Oh, you need a big city. Talk to Phil. Talk to Matthew about some of the other things in Arizona. It's just great to make those connections with those location managers. So that's the other great thing about any project you get out. So you could talk about that when you had the Transformers film out here. Mm-hmm. You must have made a lot of contacts that way in the industry for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a really great example of a project. They came and spent about $15 million out here, and they really only filmed for 5 days, Monday through Friday. But they had a great experience while they were out here. And what we found with them is that because we were day one of the whole shoot, and let's say it was a 75-day shoot, just throw the number out there, because we were day one, and then they were going to go to Detroit and then to, I think, South Africa and Ireland, I believe, they had to build all the cars out here. And so all of the trades, because you're dealing with physical welding and things, this isn't like virtual creating things. You physically have to build the cars. You had the people from North Carolina, the people from Washington. And so not only did we get the crew hires, we basically took every hotel room down along the I-17. And then in the Deer Valley Air Park, they took down 2 large warehouses. And that's where they built all the vehicles that were there. So the economic impact from that movie was not just the 5 days, because it probably would have been less than 15 million. It was the month and a half of prep and all these people staying out here and shopping and getting materials sourced locally out here. So, I mean, these movies, it's, you can go through like a ton of these examples. Like another one was Moneyball. And Moneyball actually came out here to shoot. I can't remember the name of the original director, guy with a bald head.
Steven Soderbergh.
Steven Soderbergh. Okay. So as many of you know, the A's played at the Phoenix Muni Stadium. And it's still a very 1970s, 1980s looking facade, which is really a cool thing. So they were going to shoot the movie there because they wanted everything to be totally authentic. So they got their budget. We actually started removing all of the signage and on the back wall and putting it back to how it was in like 1988 or 92 or something. So like the Southwest Airlines, it was that yellow, mustard, and orange, which was their color. Like literally they had skinned everything. I mean, they had taken down all the signage. And then whoever the studio was said, no, this is too much money. And there was an infight and they said, we're not making this movie. And so then they had to take down all of the artwork that they had done at the actual stadium. And then they ended up remaking the movie, but it clearly was in Florida, I think, where they shot it because palm trees in the background. But yeah, these major movies come out here and they have a really big impact.
I think also, so side note on Georgia, she was the former head of physical production for Paramount Studios. So when you talk about that, this is the smallest industry I've ever seen, and everybody knows everybody, and decisions, we can go out and sell, but if you're going to go shoot in Arizona, you're going to find someone who just shot in Arizona. You're going to say, how was it? And I had a call from a producer from a huge series that's out right now, and he'd called 3 years ago and he said, what has Arizona done lately on this magnitude? And this is a series everybody will know, and I had to say nothing. I mean, we had to go back, 10, 20 years to show that we had handled something, on that level. And in this case, I wasn't the film commissioner when they had the past incentives, and the incentive goes to the Arizona Commerce Authority, so I recused myself from this. So I major shout out to these two and the other ones who kind of kept those conversations going, studio people, with all the stakeholders, because I removed myself from those conversations. But certainly for everybody, not just for Tucson and Southern Arizona or Phoenix, where they also shot, but everybody can now say that Arizona rose to the occasion on a $28 million pilot directed by J.J. Abrams, a huge director, starring Josh Holloway. So this was not a small project. This was really as big as it gets, and it hadn't been to Arizona in decades. And so I think we were very lucky that as Peter said, it called for Phoenix back in the 70s, and Phoenix is a victim of its own progress and all the growth, and it doesn't look like that anymore. They came and did some insert shots, but they had to keep it really tight because you go wide. Oh, there's this huge building that looks like was built yesterday. So, to the efforts of the city of Phoenix and GPEC and Phil and these people in economic development, they've done a really great job. So it actually created opportunities for two cities. But in addition, I now, when people say, what have you done lately? Because that's all anybody cares about, I can say, well, we did this. And people can look to that, and they can call HBO, they can call Georgia, and they can say, yeah, Arizona rose to the occasion, did a great job. Had things been a little different timing-wise, we would be there. So it's really given us, it's kind of the cherry on the top. We've been working at rebuilding our infrastructure. To have a big win when you're going back out there in an aggressive way, COVID's over, we've got some other things going for us. It's really nice to have a win. I was talking to one of the studios, and the chairman said, well, maybe we'll be the first person to rediscover Arizona. I go, no, HBO has already done that. You get to be number 2, which is much safer and much easier. And he laughed, and he said, yes, you're right. He goes, and I'd be thrilled to be number 2. So certainly as a person going out and selling the state and working with other film commissioners, it's just a lot easier to have the wind at your back. And the work they both did on, in the filming in their areas, in the work they've done, and also Meg Roeder, our film commissioner for Flagstaff, in the work that they've done going at the AFM, the work they've done educating people about the program, that's also had a ripple effect. Now that people locally know about the changes that are happening here, what you're seeing is local people who would have thought, if I love Arizona and I love film, but if I'm going to have to make a choice, if I want to pursue film, I'm going to have to go to New York or LA or Atlanta. That's no longer the case. So what we're finding is that young people are really saying, hey, I can make a living here, and you can't beat the cost of living in Arizona, and it's a fraction of the cost to shoot in California. What we're seeing is some of our veterans who, left when everything kind of went away are moving back. And then we're also seeing people, who have come out here from California to shoot. They go, wait a minute, I can trade in this house for this amount of money, and I can get this amount, and you can't beat the quality of life. And, they'll hook me up, and I can set up shop here, and taxes are less, cost of doing business is less, quality of life is better. And all due respect to LA, I lived there for 16 years and have family there, so I have to be a little bit careful if I want to show up at a family reunion. But I think the real gift of that project was at the right time when everything else was coming together for Arizona, we're going out with a win, a major win that's as good as any state can brag about a project that they had there lately. And that's a fundamental difference. And it was all, as Peter can talk, but it was an all hands on deck between the city, the county, nonprofit, the state, local vendors, local actors, crew. It really showcased, and because people came from the Phoenix market and they came from other markets, it really showcased that Arizona is ready for prime time.
Mm-hmm. And how long ago did this happen?
2.5 years.
Yeah, it was at the tail end of COVID. The dates escape me. 2022.
21, 22.
The end of 2020.
Yeah.
Big lunch, and we had to do it outside because we
Right.
were inside.
And there was the prep, which, you know, as Phil talked about that other movie, the prep is always before the shoot, and then there's the wrap, and they actually kept some stuff in storage here for the better part of a year. So it had a huge economic impact, which right there is a huge win, not only for Tucson, but also for crew from Phoenix and also Phoenix locations. But what it really did is it let people know that we're ready and that we can handle any size project. So I think that, as well as the economic impact, is great. And all of us, you know, we live and die on those metrics. But the fact that it put us back to the reputation that we had decades ago when people now think about Arizona certainly will make my job easier, and I think everybody else's job.
I was really proud of Duster coming in because I had every single one of my friends work on the show, and one of our battles is that we are very skilled here in Arizona, and sometimes people don't think that. They don't expect that we work with the biggest gear. We can do any setup that they want us to set up, and that was just a really big way that we could show that. And they wanted to stay here, but then our incentive didn't happen fast enough, and now they might want to come back, which is really cool. Or we're trying to get them to come back.
No, they're
We're-
not coming back.
They're not. Oh, well, we want people to come back.
Pick up shots, but the real thing is, you know, when I reach out to this executive producer, and everybody would know the name of the series. It's one of the hottest series, and it's got a couple of spin-offs. But I can call him back and go, you remember you asked me, like, what's the latest thing we've done that was major and stuff like that? Well, we did Duster, and that helped galvanize our crew base. It got vendors to think about expanding and buying newer equipment. I know the one in Tucson went out and bought a couple of trucks from Galpin Ford out of LA. Nothing creates success like success. And so I feel really blessed that as we're going out, and, you know, it was about 6.5 years ago, they said, go to London and sell Arizona. And I had a copy of the Land for All from Arizona Highways, which shows for every state in the union, there's an Arizona location that doubles. I didn't have a business card, you know, but we had that. But I think now we're in a much stronger position, and we've had some major successes. So I'm very optimistic about what the future will bring.
I think it's really cool too, because like even the new season of Mandalorian has Lake Powell in it. Even though it's a majority of Utah, we still have a section in Arizona. So even Mandalorian came out here to Lake Powell. And it's just, I mean, the Fablemans came out here for a little bit too. So
I'd worked on Fast and Furious 7 before I took this job. We kind of supervised those cars being shoved out of the C-130 that was based at Mesa Gilbert. So that Transformer, and on our website, and I know most of the state local film offices have a list of movies that were done here. When I first took this job, I wanted to be able to say this, and we found over 5,000 movies that were shot in Arizona. So it's, and what we say when we're talking to a Paramount or a Universal is, you know, we're old friends, we're back. You know, we've known each other for close to 100 years. Here's a list of movies you made here, and there are studios really looking at coming here. So I think that we're in a very strong position, and you know, I am loath to speak about a program until the final rules are out, because the moment you say this is something in stone, it changes. But what I do think is that, and I was not part of the earlier one, so it would be wrong of me to comment. Phil is in a much better position to say the strengths and weaknesses of that. But what I can say is I think this one is a win-win. It's a win for Hollywood, but it's definitely a win for Arizona. And for anything to be sustainable, everybody has to win. If we're giving away the store and not getting anything, that can be a race to the bottom. So I think what this is something that all parties can benefit from. And I think the people who worked on it, and I, again, recused myself, so I can't take any credit for any of it, but I think the people who worked on it gave it a lot of thought, and they wanted something that is sustainable and benefits all parties.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. With all this, because it seems like Arizona is just like prime time, everything that's coming in, all the projects and with the incentive, what's one thing that you guys individually would wish that, this industry here in Arizona would know or would prepare themselves, how they can prepare themselves?
I am pleased, and especially organizations like yours, we are becoming less siloed. The fact that at the AFM, you had Phoenix, Tucson, and Flag together sharing a booth is huge. You're seeing organizations like yours that are much more inclusive, that are opening up, creating opportunities for everyone. I think we're finally out of that scarcity mentality, where I don't see you as my competition. I see you as my ally. I can refer something to you because you might refer something to me. And I think that in the 21 years I've been here and the 6 years that I've had this job, a little over 6, what I've seen is all of the different organizations that years ago had kind of staked a claim are now really working together. The APA, which you're on the board of, is expanding into Southern Arizona. That's a huge thing. One of your past presidents, Rachel, was from Tucson. You have Peters involved. You have Monsoon Production Services. So what I'm seeing is that everybody is seeing the potential, and instead of me fighting you or me fighting you, it's a rising tide raises all boats. And I think that's a really great thing. And I'm really glad you guys put this together, the podcast, but also your organization. We need more people, especially young people, to realize the opportunities in this industry, and that they can not only learn their craft in Arizona, but they can practice their craft and they can make good money here in the state. And there obviously, the major markets may provide initially more opportunities, but our goal is to make sure that throughout the state, people are working in this industry.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Well said.
Do we have time for that?
I'm trying to think of the answer to that because he kind of took mine.
Oh, well, that's why I wanted to go first, because he's got more experience than me and he's more articulate. So I had to jump in real quick.
I would say it's just people realizing that there's other people out there that are like them. I can't tell you how many times I'll get a phone call from somebody saying, "I'm going to bring film to Arizona. There's no film out here. There's no community out here." And I just look at them and say to myself, well, you clearly haven't done any research. Because there are organizations that are out there. There's some newer ones like yours. There's the APA that's been around for quite a while. But there are a lot of organizations that are out there. So just get involved with them too. And I really think that, there's the group called the Arizona Film and Digital Media Coalition, which is kind of the lobbying arm, which helps, if you will, kind of push the incentive in certain directions. So if you want to, get on the policy side, that's a really good group to join. Things like the Arizona Production Association, listing yourself with the state film office directory as well. Those are the ways to get the jobs. But there is a community out there. I think the biggest challenge, though, is that usually everybody's always working so much that when you have an event, no one has time to show up because they have like a 1 p.m. call time. So they're not going to make the 6 o'clock cocktail hour.
Right.
And so it's always hit or miss when it comes to networking events. So I'm really glad you're putting those on as well, because I think the more opportunities out there, the more chances for everyone to interface, the better, and just to grow the industry.
That's not a bad problem to have. That everybody is everybody is probably the best example of what is happening in Arizona is that everybody is working, and when people are working, people are more apt to share their knowledge. And so I've seen in the last, I think with COVID, because the governor's policies, we kind of bent the curve and we didn't have the drastic shutdown that like California did. So I was getting calls, and I'm sure everybody else was, from companies that probably never would have thought of leaving LA. We're talking huge companies, their head of production going, to leave on Arizona. So we weathered that storm. And I think a lot of people across the spectrum are seeing our industry differently, and are seeing the economic impact. And I think that's a great thing.
I'm also excited about all these workshops that we're having because we have all these skilled people and we're all so busy already in the influx of projects that are going to come in. We are training our next generation of people. Arizona Filmmakers is going to have a lighting workshop soon. The APA is working on some camera building workshops. Like, we're trying to get a whole new generation of production assistants with your office. So that's something that we're doing as well. That's growing our industry here and trying to keep people here, which I'm excited about.
And I think to really show them that it's, I go and I'll talk to the colleges. I'm sure you do this as well. And you ask who wants to be a director, everybody raises their hand. And a lot of times there's so many more jobs on set, and people just aren't aware that they are there. And I think a great example was a gentleman who was a locations manager, became one. His name was Eric Hofstetter, who's no longer with us. And his buddy called him up and said, hey, will you come out and help on this TV show? And Eric really didn't know much about the film business. He got out there and he's pulling cables through the desert, and he started to understand the industry. And then he noticed this guy sitting in a truck with the air conditioning on, and went over and knocked on the window and said, what do you do? The guy says, well, I'm the location manager. And he goes, what's that? Well, I deal with the contracts and find the locations. And he goes, that's what I'm going to do. But he had no idea that job even existed. Right. So just getting yourself out there on set as much as you can. The indies are really great for training, but I would also say, like, if you can get on a Lexus or a Nissan commercial or something, and some of these production companies that do come from Hollywood, they're really large and they're really big, and they'll blow your socks off the size of these things. But it's interesting just to get exposed to that on set as well.
That's how I learned. I got thrown in the fire on the biggest sets ever, and that's what's so fun about Arizona.
And in the same way, we're seeing film offices go to events together like they used to in our heyday. You're seeing that different organizations that are doing training are working together. So the APA has waived, if you take our 5 days, they've waived the 3 call sheets because they see that after 50 hours, it's like, if you're working a 12-hour day, that's 36 hours. We're putting you through 50 hours. So, and we encourage, you can never know too much. And different instructors have a different point of view and a different way. And somebody in your program might be more relatable to someone than in ours or in the APA's. I mean, the reality is the need is so great, we could absorb 4 or 5 more organizations doing training. So, but what's nice is we're all kind of aware of what we're doing. We're all working together. We tend to use, APA members as instructors. We use, vendors who are part of the APA. So I think what is happening is we are finally becoming again a community. That's how it feels to me. That's different than when I moved here 21 years ago, it felt like there was a community. And then when everything went away, it felt like everybody ran back to their little silo or their cave and were just doing their own thing. And in the last, really since COVID, I've seen people, we share information, and I think that's really what a state has to do. It takes a village to create an industry, and we have a great history of doing that. And it's just really rewarding to see the teams, and personally for my job, I love to go out with other film commissioners because, I know what I know. Most importantly, I know what I don't know, and I have no problem if they want a warehouse in Phoenix, or they want a location in Tucson, and they'll call me on certain things. So I think we're seeing that we're all working together, which is really refreshing.
Our offices in particular, because Phoenix and Tucson are the 2 biggest in the state, We throw work to Phoenix a lot if they're looking for a major city with roads for a car commercial. We have a nice downtown, but it's not going to match the size of Phoenix's. And then the inverse is true. If you're getting calls for ranch lands or desert, vast expanse of desert or mountains, we have more of that rural look. So we compete with each other, but not really. We have such a different kind of look. And so people come to us for different reasons. So it's great to have a state that all works together. It's really just get ready, because these incentives are going to hit and things are going to take off. It's really exciting. We're trying to let people know we're sort of the cheerleaders for it now, because it's now a law. The applications will go live soon, and then the floodgates will open. The thing to be cautious about is there is a writer's strike that's happening right now. It started March 1st. I'm trying to remember what it was. May 1st. That's how it feels like it's been that long. Yeah, so that will be a dent eventually in our goals to bring filming here. Hopefully, it will be short-lived, and both sides will get what they need, and everyone will continue to flourish. So that's something to be cautious about. But until then, once the incentives really kick in, things will start happening. So get ready, everybody.
Yeah, I feel like it's a powder keg. Like it's just almost there. The writer's strike is a little bit of a blip in it.
Yeah.
But also with the writer's strike too, it could also help us. We never can tell.
Right.
Could have these projects that are already fully written. They just need to be shot. So that could be a benefit too. But yeah, I think once it happens, and once we get a few, under our belt, if you will, that have gone through the process, have gotten whatever the incentive is they were eligible for, and it was a very simple process to them, then you're going to see a whole tidal wave of these projects coming in here. So that's definitely hold on.
Hold on and keep learning. Someone said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Do you remember that scene in Deep Impact where she's standing with her father on the beach ready for the tidal wave to take him out?" Sometimes it feels that the amount of and we all talk, and so just in people who are calling in studios, and it's like several calls a day of, so when are you going to have those rules? Because we're ready. I think we're going to see a renaissance. And I think we can be bigger than we were in our heyday, because we are so much more than Westerns. Tucson is bigger than it was when it was just old Tucson studios. You have Mescal. Phoenix is a world-class city. Our rural areas, we're talking about broadband linking so people can, now you're not running the film to the counter to fed, you're actually sending information. So broadband is, so I think with the changes in the state, I think it bodes really well. If I had any concern, it's qualified labor. So, from the state standpoint, I appreciate what you guys are doing. I appreciate you guys having workshops. I appreciate the APA doing them. We try to be aware of what we're all doing so we can all support each other. But I think good times are ahead. Really good times.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for coming. I love learning about everything. It's really nice.
Yeah. Just like Kayla said, thank you so much for sitting at our round table. And I would love to have you guys back, and maybe even, replace me with another film office.
Yeah.
No, we can't do it without you. You got to be in that fight.
You're locked in. This is the band, okay? It's like, you can't put a new guitar player in the band.
But we'd be glad to come back maybe in a year or something to sort of let you know some of the successes we've had under our belt because of the incentives program, because we want to be cheerleaders for this. We're looking forward to its success, and we want to make sure that people know about the success, so that way the program can keep getting improved and extended year after year. We're looking forward to that.
And keep us posted on your organization's development. I'm sure I speak for all of us that we have a vested interest in your success. And so anything that we can do, because you're doing part of the hardest job, you're motivating people to stay in this state and become part of the solution. If everybody leaves, it's a much harder sell.
So guys, stay here because I need more friends. That's a short answer right there. Thank you for watching this show, and we'll see you on the next one.